Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing a case headed to the Supreme Court of Canada to address the question of whether Indigenous self-governments are subject to charter scrutiny. So if the Charter of Rights and Freedoms applies to the conduct of those Indigenous self-governments. Now, what the Court of Appeal in the Yukon found about this, Jesse, was that Section 25 Section 25 of the Charter shielded that Indigenous self-government in this case from charter scrutiny. So what exactly is Section 25 of the Charter? A lot of people probably don't know about it. And how was it applied in this case?
Right. So it is a little known provision, and hasn't really gotten much judicial treatment. And the few times where it has sort of come up in the Supreme Court, they've sort of dealt with the case on another basis and left that issue to another day. But the provision essentially, I'll read it. It says the guarantee in this charter of certain rights and freedoms shall not be construed so as to abrogate or derogate from any Aboriginal treaty or other rights and freedoms that pertain to the Aboriginal peoples of Canada. So, in essence, it means that Aboriginal rights and freedoms are not to be affected by the enactment of the charter. And so there's a debate in the literature and certainly in the case law a little bit about how what exactly does that mean. So there's a camp there that say, this is really just an interpretive provision. They'll use the expression interpretive prism. I'm not sure what that means, but that is camp number one. Then you have the other camp, which is that this is more substantive and has a bit more teeth, a bit more bite, and that it serves to shield Aboriginal rights. That the charter can't be used to remove them, or impact them in any way. And so there's a middle position, which is the position that the CCF is advancing, which I assume we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, so why don't we get into that right now? Bryn, what exactly is the CCF arguing about how Section 25 of the Charter should be interpreted this case? What is that middle path?
So the CCF is arguing that Section 25 is a guarantee to Indigenous peoples that the Charter will not be used as a sword by non-Indigenous persons to undermine the specific and distinct collective rights of Indigenous peoples in Canada. So CCF is asserting that it is a shield in part, but not a complete shield, as the court found below. And specifically, the CCF is arguing that it does not deprive Indigenous individuals from making charter claims against an Indigenous government or shield all decision-making of Indigenous governments from charter review. It is really about protecting against challenges by non-Indigenous persons to kind of differential treatment that arises from the collective rights of Indigenous peoples in Canada.
Bryn, can you give me an example of how this argument might be applied, how the shield not sword argument might work in practice?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a couple of examples that kind of come to mind when thinking of it being a shield. So, you could have, for example, a non-Indigenous person, changing the facts in this specific case a bit. You have a non-Indigenous person that resides on reserve or settlement lands and brings a Section 15 challenge on the basis that they're not able to vote or run for office in the Indigenous government at issue. We would say that type of challenge is shielded by Section 25. You could also have challenges by non-Indigenous persons to differential treatment in terms of access to hunting or fishing as a result of Aboriginal and treaty rights. Again, something we would say is shielded by Section 25.
Jesse, is there anything you want to add to that in the minute we have left?
Yeah, well, I would just say that I would say, Section 25 was meant to protect other rights. It was not meant to deprive Indigenous peoples of the rights in the Charter, right? So the way to see it in a way is sort of like what Section 26 of the Charter does, which is to recognize that the Charter isn't exhaustive. It doesn't contain all the rights and freedoms that one might have. And so Section 25 does something similar. It recognizes that, and it seeks to protect those rights, but it includes the charter, right? Indigenous peoples also have charter rights.
Mm-hmm.
They're not limited to the other rights that are protected.